Hi, my name is Matthew Eusebius, and I'll be presenting you on how jet engines work. Now, people mainly want to think about how an airplane flies. Generally, most people know, though, that you have a high pressure on top of the wing, and then you have a low pressure on the bottom of the wing. And you get that high pressure to go to low pressure, because generally that's what pressure wants to do. It goes to high to low, and then you get that lift. But what people don't know is how the jet engines move an aircraft forward. And usually you can think of it as a action and reaction. In a jet engine, you have fuel, it combusts, and you get that velocity comes out of the jet, and in turn that creates a thrust to move the plane forward. Now, sort of the geometry of the jet engine is made up of 5 parts. You have the intake, the compression, the combustion chamber, and in the combustion chamber you have the turbine, and then you have the exhaust. Now the simpler part, the intake, is just where the air particles enter. It's a structure that is mainly can mainly be thought of a pressure differential, because you have all this space of air particles, and suddenly it enters this small hole. So when it enters a really small space, you get a pressure difference. And even though this is one of the more simpler parts of the aircraft, a lot of people do tons of research to get the most efficient way of having the particles go in through the jet engine. After the air particles come through, it goes through the compressor. And usually this is 12 stages of fans. It goes from the very big fans over here to the smallest fans at the end, and that's to create a pressure difference, again, to increase the temperature. So as you have the air particles moving forward from the first fan to the end of the fan, the temperature heats up, and if you come back to this geometry, you can see that the cold air comes through the intake, and the intake gets even smaller, and the fans get even smaller, and then that creates that high temperature to enter the combustion chamber. Now, after heating up those air particles, it enters the combustion chamber and finally ignites with the fuel. So you have fuel coming down through a pipe or something of some sort, coming through this end, and the air comes through this end. And then the air is hot enough to ignite that fuel, and eventually you have a thrust, or a force to come out of the exhaust. Now, after that fuel comes out of the combustion chamber, it turns the turbine. And what the turbine's for is that usually in a jet engine, the turbine's connected to the compressor, the compression through one shaft. So if it's connected, that means if the turbine spins, the compressor's fans spin. And the turbine's able to spin because after that force from the combustion fluid happens, it hits the fan blades at this angle, seen here, and you get that turning for the turbine, and as well as the compressors. And if you want to make the plane move faster, you put more fuel, moves faster and faster, turbine moves faster, and the compressor moves faster. Last but not least, you have the exhaust. Now, usually exhausts are of this type, or of this size. It's called a nozzle. And the reason for that is because when you have a nozzle geometry, you actually can create more force because it enters a small geometry, a small circle, and then it exits out into the atmosphere. That creates an even greater thrust. Now, even though it's another simple part of the jet engine, people research on the size and geometry, the best way to get the efficient and most amount of thrust. And altogether, from this movie, you see that all these parts are working together. So the cold air particles come in through here, they enter the intake through the compression, and the compression is heating up those air particles. It enters the combustion chamber, the hot air that now became hot air combusts with the jet fuel, and finally it goes through the turbine, spinning the compression even more, and finally throughout the exit to give the plane that thrust. These are my sources. Thank you for watching.